Sai Ram and welcome to the next session in computational linear algebra. In this session, let us try and solve a few problems with the knowledge of what we had covered in the last few sessions. Let us begin this session with a prayer. Om Sai Ishwaraya Vidmahe Satyadevaya Dhimahi Tanna Sarva Prachodayat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So before we begin, let us remember that the idea of a problem solving session is to enable each individual to solve problems on their own, and it is not about just picking a few problems and trying to solve in this session. These are problems where we can look at them as different types, and we are trying to see if we can get an approach of how to solve. So let us take that from this session and try to solve many more problems. So let's begin. Here is the first problem. We have been given a specific matrix. Now we could say at a point in elimination we get this, or this matrix is given. Really does not matter. There is no third pivot, right? We are able to observe there is no third pivot, and row exchanges are not possible. Now if I even try to do a row exchange here, I find that this is again a 0, and therefore even row exchanges are not possible, which means that elimination is failing. Okay, we have to prove that A is not invertible. Of course, this is some result that we would have earlier definitely used, but we are trying to go in detail and trying to really see how to prove that we have to prove that A is not invertible. A inverse doesn't exist. And for every problem, right? So let us pause the video at the point before we get to the solution. Think on our own and then proceed to check the answer. Okay. Now let's move to the solution. Now what we have is, if at all A inverse exists, if at all it existed, then we know that A inverse times A is going to give us the identity matrix. Okay, we are going to pick up the row view of multiplication, right? And this is the crux, right? This is the approach that we have to take away from this solution. In order to prove this, we are somehow picking up the row view of multiplication. Now how did we arrive at that, right? That is the key point that we should look at. Anyway, so we are trying to see if we can bring up the third row of A inverse. If we want the third row of A inverse, if we are going to use the elements of the third row of A inverse and take the combination, right? Use these as the scalars and take the linear combination of the rows of A, because A inverse times A we are picking up to be I, then that will produce the third row of the identity matrix. Now we know what's the third row of identity matrix. It is 0, 0, 1, 0. This being a 4 by 4, we are able to understand that the third row has got to be 0, 0, 1, 0. So let's assume that the third row of A inverse is going to be given by some scalars here. Okay. Now let's try and see what kind of linear combination actually produces the third row of I. So here it is. This is what this is going to produce. So I have the first row of A times the first scalar from the third row of A inverse. Similarly, the second scalar, second row, third scalar, third row, and the fourth scalar and fourth row. And this must produce the third row of identity, which is 0, 0, 1, 0. Just by looking at this, let's write down the equations or the linear equations that form from here. So let's see here. So B31 times A11 times B32 times 0, B33 0, B34 0. So I have B31 times A11 must give me 0. Right? And what does that tell me? That tells me that B31 has got to be 0. We derived the first scalar in the third row of the inverse, right? The third row of A inverse, we have derived the scalar, it's got to be 0. Great. Let's try and look at the second scalar. So for that, look at the second element in each row. B31 times A12, B32 times A22, but these two again are zeros here, B33 0 and B34 0. Therefore, these two must give us the second element here, which is 0. Now we have already found that B31 is 0, and what does that tell us? That this part must go to 0, which means that B32 also is becoming 0. So we have derived two elements in the third row of A inverse. We find that this has gone to 0 as well as this has gone to 0. Okay, what is left? Let's try the third element. B31 times A13, we know that this is 0, so there is no contribution from here. B32 times A23, whatever this be, we know that B32 has gone to 0. So there is no contribution from here as well. B33 times 0, no contribution from here, and B34 times 0 must produce a 1. That's not possible, right? And that's the proof to say that A inverse cannot exist, right? I hope you appreciated the way we are looking at the solution rather than the solution itself. Let's move to the next problem. So let's say that, here is another kind of problem that can be given. If we are given that A squared inverse, so when we talk about A squared here, we have to understand it is A times A and its inverse exists, right? That's the meaning of the statement. If A times A or A squared inverse exists, then we have to prove that A inverse also exists. And if that's given by B, then we have to prove that A inverse must be equal to AB, right? Okay, so how do we look at it? Since we are given that A squared inverse equal to B, let's just write this simple equation. A squared B is equal to I. We know that because each of them, B is the inverse of A squared, and that gives us, so let's expand on this. A times B is equal to I, and if you put the parenthesis around the AB here, what do we get? A times AB is got to be I, right? And therefore we have already from this, it's clear that A is behaving AB is behaving like the inverse of A, right? A times this is giving me the identity, right? It's got to be the inverse. But the inverse definition states that, you have to multiply with this on the left hand side as well as the right hand side in order to produce this. So we could pick up the other side of it, BA square times BA square is equal to I, and then, similarly here, put the parenthesis here. Now we have BA times A is giving us the I. What does this convey? If I pre-multiply A by BA, that's identity, which means BA is kind of acting as an inverse and AB is kind of acting as another inverse only on the right hand side. Now we could ask the question, is this going to be the same, right? We had proved, if you remember in the inverse session, we had proved that there are no two inverses for a given matrix. When an inverse exists, it will be at most one, or if it exists, it will be just one matrix, right? Okay, in this case, what we want to look at is, if we have a right inverse and we have a left inverse, we have to prove that they are the same. And when we prove they are the same, we would have proved this statement saying A inverse equal to AB, right? So let's attempt to do that by looking at some general matrices. So let us take x, y and z. So I should have put a comma here. So let x, y and z be matrices such that xy equal to I and yz equal to I. A very similar criteria we are looking at. Y's left inverse is x and y's right inverse is z, right? And consider this product x, y, z. I can put a parenthesis here due to associative property, and since I know yz is I, this becomes x. Similarly, I can put a parenthesis around the left 2, and I can get this result to become z. What do we have? X, y, z on one hand can become x, and the same product is also becoming z, which means that these two have got to be the same, right? And what does that convey? That we really cannot have something called as the left inverse and right inverse, and therefore this would be the same. And similarly here, AB or BA is going to act as the inverse, and therefore A inverse is going to be AB. Now let's not extend this property and say that since this is true, matrix multiplication is commutative. That will be a very wrong result to conclude. So let's be careful. In this case alone, this is seemingly working. Similarly, the second wrong conclusion that we could make is that always the left inverse is equal to the right inverse. That may not happen, and it tends to happen with respect to square matrices, right? We have been discussing inverses only for square matrices, and therefore for square matrices, here is something that we can take away. It happens that the left inverse and right inverse are going to be the same, but it may not be the same when we go for some kind of rectangular matrices. But there are other beautiful things to pick up from here. Here it is. So one of it we understood, left inverse has got to be right inverse for only square matrices. If we found that if A square inverse exists, then A inverse exists, right? And therefore here is another conclusion: if A square is invertible, so is A, right? So that's another takeaway from this problem. Let's move to the next one. So we are asked to find the inverse of these two matrices and see whether we are able to find something unique with these two matrices. it looks like something we had done before. Please try and think about it. So these are permutation matrices, if you remember right? They would, if you see, they are just either, if you take the columns or the rows, doesn't matter, they will be the rows or the columns of the identity matrix. So let's just look at the columns. Let's say you see here we have 0 0 1 0 1 0 1 0 0, which are actually the columns of identity matrix. Similarly here 0 1 0 0 0 1 1 0 0, they are still the columns of the same identity matrix, but they are kept in different positions. That's it, right? And that makes them a permutation matrix. So question is, we'll have to find the inverse of these permutation matrices. Let's try. Okay, so for the first one, let's attempt. So I'm calling this as P1, and I'm going to pick up P1 times P1 inverse is going to give us the identity matrix. Now we could use a long method like Gauss-Jordan and try to find the inverse, but it may be worthwhile to just use our guessing faculty, and then we should be able to derive the inverse, because these are pretty simple matrices, right? Now the way we are going to look at the inverse is like this. We are saying P1 times P1 inverse, and we have to identify the P1, right? We have to identify the P1 inverse. So which view of multiplication would help us? The column view of multiplication is going to help us here, right? If I had written this as P1 inverse times P1, then I think the row view of multiplication would help us. Okay, now let's begin with the column view of multiplication. The first column of the right hand side comes from the linear combination of these three columns of P1 using the elements of the first column of P1 inverse. We need 1 0 0. 1 0 0 is sitting here. We don't want contributions from the first two columns, and therefore this makes it 0 0 1. The second column here is 0 1 0. That's sitting here in the second column. The elements of the second column must be the scalars that give the linear combination of these three in order to produce this, which means we don't want contributions from the first and third. Let's make them zeros. So we want this column to appear here. This got to be 0 1 0. What about the third one? Third one is 0 0 1 here, and that's appearing here in the first column, and therefore we want the contribution from the first column but nothing more, right? So this is going to be my P1 inverse. Okay, let's try this for P2. So similarly, let's attempt. The first column here is 1 0 0, and we need this, which is sitting here in the third position. Therefore my first column, no contribution from the first two columns. Third one, we want it as it is. The second one is 0 1 0, and it is sitting here in the first position, so we need the contribution from the first column, but we don't want it from any other. The last one is a 0 0 1, and 0 0 1 here in the second position, therefore no contributions from 1 and 3, but we want it from the second column, right? So this is our P2 inverse, right? In no time, just by looking at column view of multiplication, we are able to quickly derive what's the inverse, but we are doing it for very simple matrices. There is one very good observation that we can make looking at the inverses here, and if you remember when we discussed about permutation matrices, we talked about a specific property, and we said that its inverse is same as its transpose, right? Let's just take a look at this. 0 0 1 is the first row, 0 0 1 is the first column, 0 1 0 is the first row, the second row, 0 1 0 is the second column, 1 0 0 third row, 1 0 0 is the third column. So the transpose is exactly the same. Now in this case, what is happening is that P1 and its transpose is coming out to be the same, and that's because it's a symmetric matrix, right? If you see this is a symmetric matrix, and therefore here also it happens to be the same. So one should not conclude by looking at P1 that P1 inverse is the same as P1. No, in this case it's happening that the transpose is same because it's symmetric. Let's try this here with P2. Now look at the first row, 0 0 1, the first column 0 0 1, 1 0 0 1 0 0 0 1 0 0 1 0. This is definitely not the same as P2, right? So the conclusion must be that the inverse for permutation matrices has got to be the same as the transpose of the original permutation matrix. Okay, is it possible to prove this, right? So let's go ahead. So this is what we found. Is it possible for us to prove this, saying that for any permutation matrix P inverse has got to be the transpose of the permutation matrix, right? Let's try. So again, the two most important pictures come to our aid: the column view of multiplication and the row view of multiplication, and the idea of the definition of transpose, right? So let's look at it. If P is n by n permutation matrix, so I should have mentioned that it's not just a simple matrix. Let's assume that it's a n by n permutation matrix. Let us call E1, E2 to En be the columns of In. When I say In, it stands for the identity n by n matrix. Since P is also n by n, what it means is that P would definitely have these columns, EIs, in some position, right? It could have been changed. They won't be in the same position as In, right? It could have been changed. And the interesting thing is that if we have EI in the jth column of P, this is very, very important fact. So assume that I have E1, let's say 1 0 0. Let's say first column I leave, the second column I leave. In the third column, if I put a 1 0 0, just for a 3 by 3 example, what would happen? E1 is in the third column, and I find that since E1 has 1 in the first position, in the ith position, the first row has got a 1 here, and it's got that in the third column. And what does that convey? That P13 is 1. Okay, and that's what we're deriving here. If EI is there in the jth column, Pij has got to be 1. Okay, that's from the simple fact here. Okay, let's move ahead. The first column of P inverse must have a 1 at the row position same as the position of E1 in P. Okay, how did we arrive at this? Look at the column picture of multiplication. We know that P times P inverse has to give us I. What's the first column of I? 1 followed by n minus 1 zeros. Okay, and that contribution of that has to come from the position where E1 is there in P. The rest of the elements in P1, P inverse first column must go to 0, because we don't want contributions from any of the other columns except for the jth column, which is, if we assume that the E1 is there in the jth column. So if E1 is there in the jth column of P, then the inverse must have, so let's take this, E1 is the first column, right? The first column is sitting at some position, let's say the third position. Then in my P1 inverse, if I take the first column, I don't want contribution from the first column, I don't want contribution from the second column, I want the contribution from the third column. What does this convey? That in my P1, in P inverse, in the first column, the 1 is appearing in the row position 1, 2, 3, right? Third position, same as the position of E1 in P. What's the position of E1 in P? Third position. If 1 0 0 is in the third position here, I need a 1 in the third row of the first column of P inverse, right? So try and work it out for other columns as well, and get familiar with this very important point. So let's take one or two examples here. If we take that E1 is there in the jth column, so E1 is sitting in some third column here, then in the inverse this position has got to be 1. And what is that position? 3 1. And how did we get the 3 1? EI is in the jth column. This means that this is Pji, right? It's got to be Ji, and in this case, since we are saying it's E1, then it is J1, right? So in P inverse, J1 position has got to be 1. We know this, right? E1 is in the jth column. From here, what do we know? E1 is in the jth column, EI is in the jth column, Pij equal to 1. What does this convey? E1 is in the jth column, P1j equal to 1. So just take a look at this. P1j is 1, Pj1 in the inverse is 1. Okay, let's take one more example. Let's say E2 is in some kth column, right? So somewhere else E2 has got shifted. Let's say it's there in the first column here. Okay, this is the one that we need in the second column of I. That means that my contribution here has got to be, this has to be 1 followed by 2 zeros, is it not? We don't want contributions from these two guys, we want this from this guy. And where did this 1 appear? the 1 is appearing in P inverse in the first position and in the second column, right? So look at this, in the first position of the second column. And where did this k come from? Because we assume that the k is 1 here, right? And therefore if E2 is in the kth column of P, then P inverses K2 will become 1, right? Let's make this a little generalized. What we have is that if EI is where I has, right, no, Pij has got to be 1 here. EI means that in ith position there is a 1. And that column is in the jth column of P, then we know that Pij is 1, and by the same logic we have that P inverses Ji will be 1, right? What does that convey? That my P inverse is same as P transpose. Move to the next problem. For a square matrix A, we have to show that A plus A transpose is always symmetric. Okay, how do we think about this problem? So let's take that, B is got to be A plus A transpose. Look at every element. That's the simplest way to approach it. The ijth element of B comes from ijth element of A and ijth element of A transpose. But what do we know about A transpose? The ijth element of A transpose is same as jith element of A. And therefore, the ijth element is given by this. Okay. Since this holds, this equation holds, right, for any ij, Bij is given by Aij plus Aji. So what I am going to do is I am going to ask what will be Bji. Bj is going to be Aji plus the reverse, which is plus Aij. And what is that equal to? That's equal to, so I should have written here, I'm sorry, it should have been Bij. So let me just clear that and rectify this mistake. So we have Bji same as Bij. What does that convey? It says that B is equal to B transpose. What does that say? That means that A plus A transpose has got to be symmetric. Okay, very similar problem next. For a square matrix, we'll have to prove that A minus A transpose is always skew symmetric. Okay, what is skew symmetric? First, let's look at the definition of skew symmetric. When we say skew symmetric, it means that the transpose of a matrix is same as its negation. So if I say A transpose is equal to minus A, then we call A as skew symmetric. So let's take this example and ask if A is skew symmetric. So I have 1 2 minus 2 1. I take A transpose, becomes 1 minus 2. First column becomes first row. Second column is 2 1. Second row becomes 2 1. Is A transpose the negation of A? Apply minus sign to every single element here and check if it is same here, right? Is that skew symmetric? The answer is no, that is not skew symmetric. Okay, then what could be the example of matrices that are really skew symmetric? Here is an example of a matrix that's skew symmetric. If I have zeros in its diagonals, then we are going to get a skew symmetric matrix. And therefore, by definition, skew symmetric matrices have to have zeros in its main diagonal. Okay, so now look at it, 0 minus 2 here, 0 minus 2, 2 0, 2 0. Take a negation and then apply to every single element. We are going to get a minus 2 here and plus 2 here, and that's what we get here, which means that this is definitely skew symmetric. Okay, so an obvious property of skew symmetric is that zeros on main diagonal, and we need to prove that A minus A transpose is skew symmetric. Not just the main diagonal elements, we will also have to prove that the ijth element is same as the minus of the jith element here. Okay. So if we consider A minus A transpose, then the ijth element is coming from ijth element of A minus ijth element of A transpose. And again apply the same property here. We know that ijth element of A transpose is nothing but the jith element of A, and this is the equation for Bij. Okay. From this equation, let's substitute and find what is Bii. Bii would be Ai minus Aii, which means that it will make it 0. So this we have proved that diagonal is becoming 0. Okay. Similarly, apply the same equation for j and I. We get Bji is going to be Aji minus Aij, right? And that is equal to what? Minus of Aij minus Aji, and that is minus of Bij, and that's it. We have got it, saying that B is skew symmetric. That's very simple. Okay, so let's move ahead to the next problem. So there are interesting properties from this problem. If the original matrix can actually be written as a summation of a symmetric and a skew symmetric matrix. So what we do is given A, we calculate A plus A transpose, that gives us B, which is symmetric. From the A, we derive A minus A transpose, which is our C, which is skew symmetric. Now try and apply what is B plus C, right? Do a B plus C, we have A and A getting added, A transpose getting cancelled, we have 2A, so half of that will give us A, and therefore every matrix, right, not just any specific matrix, but any square matrix we can pick up, and we will be able to write that as a sum of a symmetric and a skew symmetric matrix, right? That's an interesting takeaway from this solution. Okay, here is another interesting problem. Is it possible to prove that a matrix with a column of zeros is not invertible? We have a proper square matrix and we have a column of zeros there. Is it possible to prove that the inverse doesn't exist? Again, what comes to our aid is the different pictures of multiplication. So what we need to think of is whether do we need to use the column picture or the row picture. Since it's given that it's column of zeros, maybe the column picture could come to our help. So let's look at the solution. If A is an n by n matrix with the jth column being all zeros, and if A inverse exists, we know that A inverse A equal to I. The moment we write this, right, that's the most important approach. How did we look at A inverse A, not A inverse? Because we are trying to see the column picture of multiplication. Okay. The jth column of I is going to come from linear combination of all the columns of A inverse using the jth column of A. The jth column of I comes from linear combination of all the columns of A inverse using the elements from the jth column of A. What's there in the jth column of A? We have got all zeros, and what would that give? It will be a zero column, and therefore can we bring up the I? No, and that's it. We have proved that A inverse cannot exist. Okay, let's move to the next problem. Prove that a matrix with a row of zeros cannot have an inverse. It should simply follow through from the previous solution in no time, right? But remember the way we have written the equation here, we are right now using A times A inverse because we are looking at the row picture of multiplication. And what's the row picture of multiplication? The ith row of the identity matrix comes from a linear combination of all the rows of A inverse using the elements from the ith row of A, using elements from ith row of A, right? What did we assume? Ith row of A has got all zeros, and therefore the ith row of the identity will be all zeros. Then it doesn't make it the identity, which means that A inverse cannot exist. Let's move to the next problem. So if A transpose is invertible, can we prove that A is invertible? Very interesting problem. Let's look at the solution. We are given that A transpose inverse exists. It means that A transpose inverse times A transpose has got to be identity. Okay, let's apply the transpose on both sides. So that gives me this left hand side whole transpose is I transpose, and we know that is equal to I, right? Okay, let's use our transpose of product and then invert the order here. We are going to get A transpose times A transpose. So A transpose which gives me A, and the second part is going to be A transpose inverse, which we have here, and again taking transpose of that. Now we shouldn't make the mistake of assuming that A transpose inverse is the same as A inverse's transpose, and therefore apply the transpose again and make it call it A inverse. We should be very careful with that. The reason is we need to prove that A is invertible, and we can't assume that since A inverse exists, we are going to say that A transpose inverse is going to become A inverse transpose. No. The reason is we are not sure whether A inverse exists. So we leave it like this itself, and we're saying I know that A transpose inverse exists, and therefore I just pick up this entire matrix, the inverse of this transpose, whatever is given, that matrix's transpose happens to be becoming the inverse for A, right? And therefore we are saying now A inverse exists, right? Now this makes sense, and we really need not do the other way, because we already proved that if for square matrices, if somebody is acting like an inverse from the right, he will also act as the inverse from the left. So this proof is done. Let's look at the next one. If A and B are square matrices, we have to show that I minus BA is invertible if I minus AB is invertible. So what is given? It's given to us that I minus AB is invertible. We need to prove that I minus BA is invertible. So there is a fact that we will have to also assume, we have to assume that B is invertible. Okay, so let's try. So the key is to actually look at this specific equation called B times I minus AB. Okay, so before we proceed, let's assume let C be the inverse of this I minus AB, right? C is equal to inverse of I minus AB. C exists because we were given this fact that I minus AB is invertible. So we know this I minus AB times C will give me identity matrix. So let's try this multiplication, B into I minus AB, that gives me B minus BAB. Now we can associate, using associative property, we can put a parenthesis here that gives me B minus BA times B. Look at this equation, I can take the B now common on the right hand side, and BA times B, so I write it as BA with this B common, and B can be now written as I times B, right? And therefore this becomes I minus BA into B. Okay, something very interesting is coming up, because from I minus AB we are getting through to I minus BA, right? Okay, now let's just post multiply this with the inverse on both sides. So what do we have? We have B into I minus AB times post multiply with C as well as this side. So the C is appearing on both sides. And what do we know? C is the inverse of I minus AB. So this part goes off. We have this side B and the remaining here. Okay. If I apply a pre-multiply of B inverse on this side, or so we are doing a post multiplier, so we can do a post multiply of B inverse here. I will get an I here. This is my final equation. And what do I have? I minus BA times another matrix, whatever that be, is giving my identity. And therefore, I know that the inverse of this exists, and it happens to be BCB inverse. And we are given that B inverse exists, therefore, this matrix does exist, and therefore, I minus BA does have an inverse. Right? So that brings us to the end of this problem solving session. And I hope you enjoyed this session and will attempt many more such problems. So let us end this session with a prayer. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.